Korean Tales. Puk-Chang, the Seer. Puk-Chang the was one of Korea's noted histories, says of Puk-Chang that he was pure in purpose and without selfish ambition. He was superior to all others in his marvelous gifts, and for him to read a book once was to know it by heart. There was nothing that he could not understand: astronomy, geology, music, medicine, mathematics, fortune-telling, and Chinese characters, which he knew by intuition and not from study. He followed his father in the train of the envoy to Peking, and there talked to all the strange people whom he met, without any preparation. They all wondered at him and called him the Mystery. He knew, too, the meaning of the calls of birds and beasts, and while he lived in the mountains, he could see and tell what people were doing in the distant valley, indicating what was going on in each house, which, upon investigation, was found in each case to be quite true. He was a Taoist, and received strange revelations. While in Peking, there met him envoys from the court of Lushu, who also were prophets. While in their own country they had studied the horoscope, and on going into China knew that they were to meet a holy man. As they went on their way, they asked concerning this mysterious being, and at last reached Peking. Inquiring, they went from one envoy station to another till they met Puk-Chang, when a great fear came upon them, and they fell prostrate to the earth. They took from their baggage a little book inscribed, "In such a year, and on such a day, at such an hour, and such a place, you shall meet the holy man." "If this does not mean your excellency," they said, "whom can it mean?" They asked that he would teach them the sacred book of changes, and he responded by teaching it to them in their own language. At that time the various envoys, hearing of this, contended with each other as to who should first see the marvelous stranger, and he spoke to each in his own tongue. They all, greatly amazed, said, "He is indeed a man of gods." Someone asked him, saying, "There are those who understand the sounds of birds and beasts, but foreign languages have to be learned to be known. How can you speak them without study?" Puk-Chang replied, "I do not know them from having learned them, but I know them unconsciously." Puk-Chang was acquainted with the three religions, but he considered Confucianism as the first. Its writings, as handed down, said he, teaches filial piety and reverence. The learning of the sages deals with relationships among men and not with the spiritual mysteries. But Taoism and Buddhism deal with the examination of the soul and the heart, and so with these things above and not with these things on the earth. This is the difference. At 32 years of age, he matriculated, but had no interest in further literal study. He became instead an official teacher of medicine, astrology, and mathematics. He was a fine whistler, we are told, and once when he had climbed to the highest peak of the Diamond Mountains, and there whistled, the echoes resounded through the hills, and the priests were startled, and wondered whose flute was playing. There is a term in Korea which reads Ian Pang Kwan, or spiritual eye, distant vision. The seeing of things in the distance. This pertains to both Taoists and Buddhists. It is said that when the student reaches a certain stage in his progress, the soft part of the head returns to the primal thinness that is seen in a child to rise and fall when it breathes. From this part of the head go forth 5 rays of light, and shoot out, and up and more as the student advances in spiritual way. As far as they extend, so is the spiritual vision perfected, until at last a Korean sufficiently advanced could sit and say, "In London today, such and such a great affair is taking place." For example, Wa Tam, who was a Taoist sage, once was seen to laugh at himself as he sat with closed eyes, and when asked when he laughed, he said, "Just now, in the ministry of Ha-In, there is a great feast going on. The priest stirring the huge kettle of bean gruel has tumbled in, but the others do not know this yet, and are eating the soup." News came from the monastery later on that proved that what the sage had seen was true. The history of Confucianism, too, deals with this, when it tells of thus going with his disciple An Ya, and looking off from the Tao mountains of Shangtung toward the kingdom of Un. Confucius asked An Ya if he could see anything, and An Ya replied, "I see white horses tied to the gates of On." Confucius then said, "No, no, your vision is imperfect. Desist from looking. They are not white horses, but are rolls of white silk, hung out for bleaching." The master Puk-Chang was a noted Korean. From the time of his birth he was a wonderful mystery, and in reading a book, if he but glanced through it, he could recall it word for word, without any special study. He became the master of astronomy, geology, medicine, fortune-telling, music, mathematics, and geomancy, and so truly a specialist was he that he knew them all. He was thoroughly versed also in the three great religions, Confucian, Buddhism, and Taoism. He talked constantly what other people could not possibly comprehend, and he understood the sounds of the birds and the voices of nature, and much, much else. He accompanied his father in his boyhood days, when he went about as an envoy to Peking. At that time strange barbarian peoples also came to pay their tributes, and Puk-Chang picked up an acquaintance with them upon the way. Hearing their language but once, he was readily able to communicate them. His own country were accompanied him were not the only ones astonished, nor the Chinamen themselves, but the barbarians were as well. There are numerous interesting stories hinted at in the history of Puk-Chang, but few suitable records were made of them, and so many of them are lost. There is one, however, that I recall that comes to me through a trustworthy witness. Puk-Chang, on a certain day, went to visit his paternal aunt. She asked him to be seated, and as they talked together, said to him, "I had some harvesting to do in Yongnam County, and sent a servant to see to it. His return is overdue, and yet he does not come. I am afraid he has fallen in with thieves, or chanced on a fire, or some other misfortune." Puk-Chang then replied, "Shall I tell you how it goes with him, and how far he has come on the way?" She laughed, saying, "Do you mean to joke about it?" Then Puk-Chang, from where he was sitting, looked off apparently to the far south, and at last said to his aunt, "He is now crossing the hill called Bird Pass in Munkyong County, Gyeongsang Province. Hello, he is getting a beating just now from a passing Yangban, but I see it is his own fault, so you need not trouble about him." The aunt laughed and asked, "Why should he be beaten? What's the reason, pray?" Puk-Chang then replied, "It seems this official was eating his dinner at the top of the hill when your servant rode by him without dismounting. The gentleman was naturally very angry, and had his servant arrest your man, pull him from his horse, and beat him over the face with their rough straw shoes." The aunt could not believe it true, but treated the matter as a joke, and yet Puk-Chang did not seem to be joking. Interested and curious, she made a note of the day on the wall after Puk-Chang had taken his departure, and when the servant returned, she asked him what day he had come over Bird Pass, and it proved to be the day recorded. She added also, "Did you get in trouble with a young bond there when you came by?" The servant gave her a startled look and asked, "How did you know that?" He then told all that had happened to him, and it was just as Puk-Chang had given, to even the smallest of details.